Inside of this box is the new Framework 12, a laptop that is going to bring repairability and also so much cuteness. But unfortunately, it's in a bunch of pieces, so let's put it together. As you can tell, this one has already been put together and tested by our labs, but we get to do it again. They are kind enough to disassemble it for us, just like Framework does after they test these. Okay, so we have our keyboard. We also have a screwdriver right here and a stylus. Now, at the moment, you can't order a stylus, but you can use any stylus that supports MPP 2.0 or USI 2.0, which are things that I know, but you can definitely configure it in the BIOS. We also have a 60-watt power adapter, which you do have to pay extra for. WD black SSD that once again you do need to option, and do note if you are getting an SSD for this that it has to be one of the 30mm long versions. You can't get a full fat 80mm SSD and throw it into this. And also you cannot get more than one stick of RAM. Here we have 16 gigabytes of DDR5 5600, and we also have a lot of IO, a hilarious amount of IO. We have HDMI, USB-C, 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 USB-A, DisplayPort, and another USB-C. I would recommend not getting that many IO modules because they can add up price-wise. This is like $100 worth of IO. Please be a cute color, otherwise I don't know what we're doing with the title and intro. Hell yeah, there we go. It's fun. Oh, we get stickers. Look at this, they have a little duck in a spaceship. Fantastic. If you're watching this channel, you probably have already heard of Framework, but if you haven't, they are a fairly new company that makes laptops that are completely repairable. So if you get the DIY version, they arrive looking something like, oh no, oh no, oh, I cannot one finger open it. They arrive looking something like this. To turn this not complete laptop into a functional laptop, we need to add in a couple of things. So first of all, our RAM, we have 16 gigabytes right here, and very sadly, they only have a single RAM slot here, which does mean they are only going to be able to have single channel memory, which will reduce your performance a little bit. Also, they use a little bit of carbon in this heat shield right here in order for like EMI and also cooling. But one bonus for that is that they have a little magnet here for the keyboard pogo pins, and the RAM flap just sticks to it, so it's way easier to install your RAM. Now, if you do leave this flap down, obviously your keyboard is not going to work, but Framework realized that that might be a problem, and they do have a message that comes up that says, hey dummy, put the flap back. Up next, we have our WD 1 terabyte, totally normal size, completely average SSD. One thing that's really nice about installing the SSD right here is it is totally toolless. So you just take this little tab, push it in, boom, your SSD is not going anywhere. A lot of the time you will have these very tiny little screws that for one are very easy to lose and kind of difficult to get in. But also, if you do lose it, everyone uses different threads and standards, so getting a new one is basically impossible and you just have to tape down your SSD. You can see the names of the people that worked on it. We do also have two 2-watt speakers and a 50 watt-hour battery, but we will talk about the testing of those later, and a pretty small little heatsink for a pretty small little processor. Now we just need to screw it together with the included screwdriver. I do really appreciate the DIY version of this because it gets you used to going in and out of your laptop. A lot of laptops these days are actually pretty easy to crack open, but many people that I know don't have the confidence to undo the couple of screws and pop it apart. What IO do we want?
All headphone jacks.
All headphone jacks. No, that's already on here. You don't have the option. You can't pull a Dell or an Asus and omit the headphone jack on this. So right here you can see that red means unlocked, and also inside of it there's a screw that you can move to permanently lock these in position. The point of that is so that if these are deployed in schools, like Framework hopes that they will be, you can't have your kids going there and just taking these out and just whipping them at you.
That was close.
One thing to note about these, if you're using the display outs, is that they do not play well at all with capture cards. Your display IDs get super confused when you have display out to an adapter to a display. It gets all messed up. So maybe don't try and do screen capture with one of these, or put aside several hours to set it up, because it will be awful. Now that we're at the point where we normally start our unboxing of laptops, let's have a little look. The construction is almost entirely plastic, but it's two plastics. So right here we have some hard touch stuff, and then along the outside we have a bunch of TPU, so that if you hand this to a child and then you give it a little bit of a drop, hopefully it will be nice and rugged. Also, as we saw before, on the inside there is a metal chassis to help with rigidity and reliability, and metal's nice. I had to say three things. I blanked for the third. It says pie is better than cake. You know, when I think about it, I agree.
No, there's like one good pie, two. Pumpkin and strawberry rhubarb.
And blueberry and apple.
No.
All right, the power button is over on the side, so we're just gonna press that, and I'm going to press on into the segue to our sponsor.
XIDAX. Their X6 line of gaming desktops are built with the enthusiast in mind, featuring top-of-the-line components like the 9800X3D and 9070XT. With an expert team helping you every step of the way, you can pick and choose parts for your dream PC and throw it all in one of their sick-looking cases, like the Onami with its curved tempered glass and dual-chamber design. And it's not just gaming rigs. They build everything from laptops to workstations as well. So visit our link in the video description to get a ready-to-go solution that's built for your specific needs, shipped right to your door.
Holy bezels, Batman. You know what? This screen looks a lot better than I expected. It is nice and bright, and brightness can make up for a lot of sins. One thing in the config that you can specify is if you want to include Windows with your purchase or not, which I would recommend just not, and then don't worry about it. I guess, am I not supposed to say that? No, pay for Windows. Now, Framework claims that it can do 400 nits, and we tested it, and it actually gets closer to 500, which is pretty darn good. That is bright enough that even with it being glossy, you could use it for like word editing and stuff like that in the outdoors. What we get here is a comical 66% of sRGB. We did measure a 4.69 Delta E2000, which is not great, but also given how limited the color space is, that is much better than I was expecting. But at the same time, everything just looks kind of washed out. Like nothing is punchy, nothing is grabbing my attention. What I will say is that if you have no clue what sRGB means or DCI-P3 or color spaces, you will probably be totally fine looking at this laptop. It isn't going to blow you away, but the contrast is pretty nice, and just looking at it here, it's fine. I could watch Netflix on this, I would be totally happy. Also, it is a touchscreen, and it seems quite well done in the touchscreen department. A lot of the time, the touchscreen digitizer and the display behind it might not be perfectly aligned, but this one right here, I don't see any of the, well, I guess I can if I'm like this close to it. So unless you use your display about here, from here it's totally fine. Also, we have a stylus. Hello. Poop. Go from soft to heavy to soft. This is quite a good stylus, I do have to say. One thing that does seem slightly annoying is the rejection of my hand while I'm using the stylus isn't quite as good as I expect. I also got used to not touching it within, how long did I do this? Like 30 seconds. So I don't think it's gonna be a huge problem long term. Now moving over to the performance of the Framework 12, it is fine. As long as you have your expectations set properly, you won't be too disappointed in this, but if they aren't set properly, when you find out that this has an i5-1334U with 10 cores, 12 threads, and a max speed of 4.6 gigahertz, you might be pretty underwhelmed. That said though, this processor is perfectly fine. They also have an i3 version, which is a tiny bit slower and a little bit more cut down, but both of them will work perfectly fine if what you want to do is like schoolwork, drawing, that sort of stuff. Not a whole lot more. I guess we've already been over all the other stuff, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD, Wi-Fi 6E. I do really like to see that. They did not cheap out on the wireless chipset, and also you can replace it or upgrade it later if you need to. And Intel UHD graphics, which let's see how well those do. All right, so we're getting over 100 FPS at 720p. Do we dare try 1080? Get friggin' wrecked, Mr. Bot. And I score again. Laptop's perfect. I'm pretty surprised. We are playing Rocket League here at 70 to 80 FPS. You can see it right there, but it's working pretty darn well. This is better than I expected, but I was also expecting pretty much nothing. So there is that. If you're curious, the Framework 13 is, nope, never mind, it's trash. This. If you're curious, the Framework 13 is like 120% faster in games according to our labs, and that makes a lot of sense because this does not have a modern processor. But I guess as long as you have your expectations absolutely through the floor, you can game on this. You know what is better than fine though? This keyboard is great. There's loads of travel on the keys, and even though the chassis isn't quite as stiff as I would want, they make up for that by having loads of travel on the keys. They have a really nice tactile feel to them, and overall, I'm going to give the keyboard a solid A. The trackpad also is pretty darn great. It doesn't have the most satisfying click that I've ever felt, but I can't tell if it's glass topped or not, but it does feel like it's glass topped, so either way, they won that one. The tracking is awesome, the click feel is pretty good, and also the taps feel great. It's a good little trackpad. Or I suspect things won't be quite as good is when we turn on the speakers. It sounds wide, which is about the only compliment that I can give. Bass, not a whole lot. Treble, not a whole lot. Whole sound stage, pretty crushed sounding. It obviously is not fair in the slightest to compare this to a MacBook in any way. This machine right here is like 3 times the cost. But just for comparison's sake, we can play a crab rave on the Mac, just so you guys can hear, you know, decent, bad. All right, Framework 12. MacBook Pro. Obviously not a fair comparison, but yeah, ouch. Here we have a 1080p webcam, and it actually looks pretty darn good. One thing that I do really appreciate is up at the top, they have a little toggle for the microphone, so you can no longer hear me. And also they have a toggle from the camera, so you can no longer see me. I really appreciate laptops that take your privacy seriously, and that is an excellent step in the right direction. As for the camera itself, it is 1080p, and it is doing a great job here. It is exposing for my face pretty well. It's not perfect, but this is pretty difficult lighting right here. It also is not making me look like a ghost or orange like many of them do. We can point it directly at a light right here, and yeah, that's pretty darn serviceable given that I am pointing it directly into some studio lights. So overall, pretty darn good job. What unfortunately is not so great though is the battery life. And this guy right here, we have a 50 watt hour battery, and that got us just over 5 hours of battery life, which is pretty disappointing in a device like this. If you get something from basically every single other established laptop maker with this kind of specs, you will get more battery than that because they are able to spend years realistically of engineering time optimizing the BIOS and the screen and how every single bit of your laptop interacts, which unfortunately Framework just has not had the experience to do yet. So the Framework 12, it starts at $550, but that does not get you a complete laptop. So we can't really consider that as a starting price. That said though, if we look at how I would configure one, we'd get lavender, of course, because I want it to be very nice and pretty. Actually, no, bubblegum. The bubblegum one's sick. WD black, bring your own windows. We'll just activate it later. 16 gigabytes of RAM, lavender keyboard, 2 USB-Cs, a Type A and an HDMI, which brings my personal config to $838. Now that is perfectly fine, really. It's neither expensive nor cheap, but it is knocking on the door of the MacBook Air, and I think that's where you're gonna start running into problems. So you really have to figure out what you want from your laptop. This right here is going to be able to be upgraded in the future. You can do kind of whatever you want with it. And I really, really appreciate Framework's vision for a laptop. But that said, if you get an i5, we're looking at $988, which is $11 off of a MacBook Air, which has a screen that blows this one out of the water and more than double the battery life. Overall though, I do have to say, I quite like the Framework 12. It is a fun laptop when so many other laptops are trying to be serious and boring. It doesn't have any significant flaws. The keyboard's great, trackpad's great, screen is acceptable enough. So if you are a turbo nerd and you want to be able to fully disassemble your laptop and that's something you're into, I think you should go and pick one up. I recommend it. I like it. And I also like you for watching to the end of this video. Huge thanks for watching, hit like, get subscribed, and have a great old day. I'll see you in the next unboxing.